From Bethlehem. It would have been his home area. And here he is thinking about a place that is in the garrison, or if you will, the garrison would be the place where the military would be stationed or garrisoned for the Philistines. And he's thinking about, they have got the best water anywhere over there, my hometown Bethlehem. I don't know what the water tastes like there. I've read some things years ago about the minerals or whatever that is in the water at Bethlehem. It's supposed to be really good. I know this, good water is good. And when you're thirsty, there's nothing like water. That's really the truth. You can drink your pop or Coke or soda or whatever you want to call it, but when you're thirsty, I mean really thirsty, you want water. And I can drink Gatorade when I'm thirsty, but I'm really thirsty. I just want some lukewarm water, not even cold, just good water, and nothing tastes like water to quench your thirst. When I was growing up in Kansas, we had some springs around. All of our ponds around our farm were spring fed, and we had one spring that was across the road. And for years, my grandpa always said, "You know what? I want to tap into that spring and bring it into the house and have spring water for the house." And it was always something he talked about. One day, he just did it. Hired somebody to run a pipe across the road. Ran a pipe from the spring, and we would go over to the spring when we were kids and just lay down and drink out of it. And it was perfect water. I mean, it's just pure as anything. Just perfect spring water. It wasn't the stuff you get in a bottle. It was really spring water. And so he piped into it. And he was up on the hill across the road from the house. And they ran a pipe all the way down and flooded the basement because it flowed into the ground. So didn't even put the pump at the spring. It had spring water that went from the pipe into the basement of the house. And they put a pump in the basement of the house. And we had spring water. We had it tested. My brother did a science project when he was in junior high school and tested all kinds of water, rainwater and everything. It tested more pure than any other water around, and it was really good water. And just wonderful spring water. That spring, they're using a well now, but they can, I think, switch it in the basement, and it's spring water in the house, and it's just delicious. And there probably isn't any water anywhere, in my opinion, that compares with it. It's just the best water anywhere. I understand what David is saying. Now, here are some things that individuals have said about this. I've heard it said this was a passing comment by David. And I would just say to you that I don't think so. I don't think that this is something David only said in passing one time. Now, I know that sometimes I have to be careful with some people in mentioning things in passing. For instance, you can't compliment some people on anything, because they'll try to give it to you. You ever met a really generous person that if you just compliment them, nice car, okay, here you go, here's the keys, and they want to give you their car. Hey, I like your hat, here you go, it's yours. And there are some people that are like that, and I appreciate people that are like that. I don't think it was necessarily that way. We had a boy in our youth group that was like that when I was assistant pastor at West Park Baptist Church. And he was always just, going all out for somebody that would just casually mention that they liked something or wanted something. He'd figure out how to do it or get it for them. We had an evangelist one time that was going through the toll booths on his way down. He says, "Man, I just love the shirts they wear in those toll booths. I'd like to have one." So the boy went to the turnpike and he drove all the way to Orlando trying to talk somebody out of a shirt. And finally, when he got to Orlando, there was a guy there that would sell him his shirt, and got the shirt for the guy. And so he had kind of that, I want to do something for someone. And he loved the evangelist. He still loves him, and it meant a lot to him. So we had an evangelist in our church that preached. One of our teenagers literally drove all the way to Orlando to get him a shirt, and stopped at every toll booth, and just finally found a guy that was selling the shirt off his back, and bought it for him and got it for him. So he put some effort and spent like a whole day getting a shirt for the guy. And he had to say, "Well, that's silly. That's trivial." Well, no, it's not, because the person that he did it for meant a lot to him, and he wanted to do something to him that showed that it meant a lot for him. I want to look at two perspectives this morning of values. I want to look at the values of these men, and I want to look at the values of King David. I want to look at the values of these men. I want to look at the values of King David. I don't think anybody will come out in a negative light. Here we are in a passage that's talking about valiant individuals in the Scripture, and it gives illustrations of the reason why they're valiant. And you have a verse that says this man was so valiant that he stood and he fought, and everybody left him, but he fought until he won, and then everybody returned for the spoil. One verse. You have a verse that says there was a man that stood in a field of lentils, and he fought, and everybody left him, but he fought until he won the victory, and everybody returned. And then you have several verses of the Scripture that said there were 3 guys that went and got David a drink of water. And I don't think it's an accident, first of all, that this passage of Scripture that this is mentioned in the Scripture here. I don't think it's an accident that any of these men are mentioned. I believe that all Scripture is given by inspiration of God. It's profitable for doctrine, reproof, correction, instruction, and righteousness. And I think that would include this as Scripture, wouldn't you say? Amen. That's what the Bible is talking about in that passage. So if these verses are included in this Scripture, and these valiant men are mentioned more than the others. In other words, here's an account. This man's valiant. Now let me ask you a question. What's the bigger deal? Killing 1,000 Philistines or getting some water for David? I mean, let me just ask you another question, just provoke thought. Do you think David wanted water from the well in Bethlehem because there wasn't any water where he was at? You think he was just really thirsty? And the answer is no. Here David is reminiscing, longing for something that to him was valuable. And I have to say to you that the thing which David valued probably wasn't valuable in the same way to the men that went to get it for him. In other words, these guys didn't go fight their way through the garrison of the Philistines to the well by Bethlehem so that they could get a drink of water, and then they brought some back. You understand what I'm saying? What they valued was not valuable to them because of its benefit for themselves. They didn't say, well, there's some mineral in it that's good for the skin, and we'd have a lovely complexion if we fought our way in there and got it. There was the water in and of itself, I don't believe, had any value for these men in and of themselves. And I'm pointing this out. I'm overemphasizing so that you'll think about it, and I really am not trying to be silly about it. But there was nothing about the water, would you agree with me this morning, that was valuable in and of itself? Water's water. Now, you give me some water from the spring in Kansas, and I'd prefer that water over any other water in the world. But when it comes right down to it, it's just water, right? And if you want to sell it to me for $1 a bottle, I'll only buy it if the other water's $1 a bottle too. But I can't get any tap water because I'll drink whatever water. Now, I prefer the water from the spring in the hill by Bennington, Kansas. But I want to tell you something, my friend. David preferred the water from the well that was by Bethlehem. And I don't think he just mentioned it casually. I think it was on his mind. I want to point out something about this. David had been given by God a great deal. Would you agree? If you were David, you could look back at your life, and if you read the book of Psalms, you read any of the Psalms, you will see that David many times looks at his life and realizes that things are hard. And there's no question that David gave up a great deal in order to be king of the nation of Israel. You say, really? He got to be king? My friend, he didn't get to be king right away. He was a fugitive for years and years and years. He was hunted, he was chased, and I have to say to you that there was a time in his life when what he was looking forward to was unrealized, and it would seem as though the things that he lost because of what he was realizing were much more valuable. And wouldn't it have been easier, don't you think, for David to make a treaty with these wicked Philistines so that he could just have some water from the well in Bethlehem? And honestly, wouldn't it just be easier if he didn't have to be king of the nation of Israel? Now, listen, we think it's an honor to be a king, but I just want to tell you something. If you understand it the way David's son Solomon understood it, when he prayed and said, God, give me an understanding heart so that I can rule the people well, you'll understand there's a great heaviness, a great duty, a great responsibility in being king of the nation of Israel. It was a great responsibility. Many times we look at a person, we look at an office, and we see the things that they have, and we think, well, you know, they really have got a lot, but we don't understand that it probably would be easier and more comfortable for them to do something entirely different if it were not for what they valued. And here we find David at a time in his life thinking over the things that he lacked instead of what he had. And he's thinking back, he's reminiscing to a time when he could go to the well at Bethlehem and he could drink the best water in the world. And honestly, it was just a real big deal. And the more he thought about it, the more he wanted. You ever get a craving for something? Now, pregnant women do. That's what I'm told. Pregnant ladies They all have their craving. And the reason I know this is because anytime you hear them talk to each other, they say, "What's your craving?"